into the lesson. So here's our schedule. Today we're scheduled to start doing some object-oriented programming. And object-oriented programming is very important in Python. You'll find it very useful, especially when you get into making high-level programs and that sort of area. So let's get started. So before we get started, we're going to take some time to recognize some achievement that we've had. We've created a new system where we are also going to, just to show you guys, we're going to show the number of points that you need to level up in the class. And these points come from quizzes, by the way. Okay, so we have our coding cadets, and then we have the Python pioneers. So here are the number of points that they have. You can see the EP stands for entry points. So to enter this level here, you need to get 1,000 points for Python pioneers. And then next to everybody's name, we just wrote everybody's, the number of points that each person has. Okay. And then we also had some people that leveled up into level 3 and level 4. So level 3 entry points, you need 2,000. And then for level 4, you need 3,000. So level 4 is going to take a little bit more to move off. You're going to need more points to move past level 4 to level 5, and then get your certificate. Just in case if you're still stuck on level 1, that's okay. Just make sure you do the quizzes from now on, and then you'll be fine. Okay, and then the final project. So hopefully most of you took the time to think about your final project, what you're going to do for this final project. So most people, the overwhelming majority chose C, which was to create a game. And we had some interesting choices. So just remember to take your time and spend your time wisely when completing your final project. And be sure to finish it before the class ends. Not this class, but all of our 9 weeks. Okay. So before we get into objects, we're going to go over the last quiz. So the last quiz was worth 700 points. We had, the average was a 637, and some people did get a perfect score. And so now let's take a look at the quiz and how you would solve it. So this quiz should have been much easier than the previous quizzes. This was only really 2 questions that had to deal with the content, essentially. This was just choosing your final project for the class. And then this one could have depended on, so a lot of people actually, I think for the most part, everyone got this question correct. It's just in some cases they forgot to maybe define what a list is, and instead they just defined what a tuple and a set is. So they got partial credit for that. But overall, most people got this question correct. There was actually nobody that got this question correct, but because people used comments in their program when they created this, they still got perfect score on this question. Because remember, commented code will receive extra credit. So even if your program didn't work, which in this class nobody's did, commented code still receives extra credit. So let's take a look at how we would solve this problem. So this problem says to make a program that prompts the user to create a pizza and then calculates the price. Here are the dictionaries used. So we have a dictionary for the crust prices over here. And then we have a dictionary for the topping prices with all the toppings. And then as always, well-commented code will receive extra credit. And then below are examples of the output. So here we're taking in somebody's name, and then we're going to say hello, and then their name. And then we're going to ask them what kind of pizza crust would they like, or how many toppings would they like, and then we ask them to type in their toppings. And then we give them their total bill. And then this yes or no doesn't really do anything. If they say yes, this will print out. If they say no, this will still print out. So that's mostly there just for, that didn't really do anything. And then this was made just to show that if you type in 3, then you type in, yep, you must accept 3 different tokens. Okay. Okay, that's fine. So let's take a look at how we could solve this. So I'm just gonna split my screen. Okay, so first we want to define our 2 dictionaries here. So we have crust prices and topping prices. So I'll just copy and paste this. Does anyone not remember what a dictionary is, by the way? It's fine if you don't, but if you do not, then just tell us right now so you won't get left behind. Okay, so everyone remembers what a dictionary is then. Okay, well that's good because dictionaries will probably come up more often than you think. So we've defined our both of our dictionaries, and so now we will go ahead and write the rest of the program. So let's go to the next line. Okay. So first we want to ask what their name is. So we could easily do that just by saying, making a variable called name, and then name is equal to input. And then we just prompt them, what is your name, like this. So then they just type in their name, and then it comes into, it goes to this variable. Okay, someone doesn't remember what a dictionary is. So what a dictionary is this is a dictionary, and then what a dictionary does is it maps one value to one key to its value. So like in an English dictionary, whenever you look up what a word means, you get its value or its definition, right? So in Python, you can create dictionaries with, you can make an English dictionary with with the Python language, but it's mainly used for other variables like this. So here we have a string called thin, and this string will map to this string here. So the string thin will map to the string 11.00. Okay, so and what it lets you do is it lets you look up if you wanted to look up what the value of the string thin is, then you could just you could do crust prices, and then you do brackets and then type in the key that you want to look up. So if you wanted to look up the key of thin, you just type this in, and then it would give you the value assigned to this key, which in this case is 11.00. Okay, so here we ask what their name is, and they'll type in their name. And then let's say we're going to say hello, and then we want to type in, or we want to type output their name, and then say what kind of pizza crust would you like. So let's do that. So let's call it the crust. Crust is equal to, and then input. And then we want to say hello. And then does anyone remember how would we put their name here? So we have their name and it's assigned in this variable called name. So how would we put this variable in this string? Does anyone remember? Okay, so if we said, so one of the suggestions was if we did this, right? So this would actually not work because we want in this function that's input, we can only put in one string, essentially. So we can only put in one string. In this value, we have a string and then a comma, and then the variable name, which is another string. So instead, we're putting in 2 strings into this function. So we actually can't do that. So if that won't work, does anyone else remember how we might do this? So hello plus name. Okay, so see what happens if I did hello plus and then name like that, just to show you. Let's just save this. So then if we typed in a name and then we say hello plus name, that does seem to work. Okay. But one of the most formal ways to do this is by using does anyone remember what an F string is? We talked about it in one of the first lessons. So it was a long time ago, but do any of you remember what it is? Does anyone remember what an F string is? Okay, so what an F string is an F string, it's just a string with the letter F in front of it, like this. But what's useful about it is it's meant just for this purpose. So if we wanted to put the variable name in this string, we could just type into curly brackets like this, and then type in the variable name, like that. So no matter what this variable is, it will always come into this string over here. So if we did this like that, see what would happen, right? Say X, and then we get this perfectly formatted in this string. Okay, so let's continue. So in our problem, we wanted to say hello, and then their name, and then what kind of pizza crust would you like? And then recall that our pizza crusts are in this dictionary called crust prices, right? So we get their crust prices, and then we want to say how many toppings would you like to add, and then their name. So let's create a new variable called toppings, or toppings. Let's say topping number, because we're asking how many. And then we're saying how many toppings would you like to add, and then their name. So we just prompt them. How many toppings would you like to add? And then their name, like this. And we want this to be an F string, so we type in an F in front of the string, like that. And remember, this is a number. So whenever we're taking a number in an input, we want to make it an int, because they will type in an int. Okay, great. So we have the number of toppings they'll add. We have the type of crust that they want to add. So now we want to just cycle through each of their toppings and then get what topping they want to add. Okay, so then that way we can calculate their bill, right? So to calculate their bill, can anyone guess what we should do? How would we calculate their bill? Okay, right. We could make a bill as a variable. So bill is equal to, and then we already have their crust. So we could just say it's equal to the price of their crust. So let's say that their crust is, so remember to look up a value in a dictionary. So our dictionary is called crust prices. And then the value we're looking up is the crust, like that. So we're just looking up the price of this crust. And then this is going to be a float, because remember, this is a string that maps to a string, but we want to take this in as a number, right? And strings are not numbers. So to make this a number, we have to do float, because remember, a decimal value in Python is a float, like that. So now we have the price of their crust in our bill. Just capitalize this. Okay, so now does anyone have any ideas of how we could go through and get each of their toppings? Okay, so in the chat, someone said to do topping prices and then look up the topping number. So topping number is the number of toppings they would like to add. So how many toppings they would like to add. So this would be a number. And then if they typed in a number, then there are no numbers in this dictionary called topping prices. So that would not work. So the answer I was looking for was a for loop. So for I in range, and then we want this to go for the number of toppings that they wanted to add. So for I in range and then topping number, okay, like that. Okay, so now in our for loop, what should we add? We want to take in the topping that they want to add. So does anyone have any idea of how we could do that? So right, we could say input, and then we could prompt them to enter topping and then the number that we're on. So in this case, I is going to go through these numbers, right? So we want I to go from 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3, depending on how many toppings that they want to buy. So so let's do this. So enter topping I, like that. And then we want to add this to the bill. So bill plus equals, right? So when we do enter topping I, we're going to get the topping that they want to add. So if they want to add olives, then we want to get the price of olives. We want to add the price of olives, right? All right, this needs an F. Okay, so we want to add the price of olives. So let's say topping prices to look up, because we're looking in the dictionary that's called topping prices. And then in this dictionary, we're trying to get the topping that they typed in. So we're looking up the topping that they typed in, which let's say that they typed in olives. So this will return this string, right? So this string is 0.9, and this is a float, and so we want to convert this string to a float like this. So now this is a float, and we're adding it to our bill, like that. Okay. So does everyone understand what these 8 lines of code do? Type in the number 1 if you understand. If you don't understand, maybe type in like the number 0 or something. Okay, so we're just going to continue. Okay, so someone says they don't understand, so type in what you don't understand, which line. So the lines are numbered here, so type in which line you want to go over again. Okay, so line 6. So we want the bill to, okay, so to make this look more simple, let's create a bill. So right after they type in their name, let's say that their bill is going to be equal to 0. So $0, right? $0 or rupees or whatever currency they're using. So let's say their bill is 0. Right when they enter the store and they type in their name, hit enter, they get a bill and their bill is 0. And then after they type in what kind of pizza crust they would like, we're going to add the price of the pizza crust to their bill. Okay, so that's what this line does essentially. So it looks up the price of the crust, right? So here's their crust. Their crust is the type of pizza crust that they would like. It takes that crust, it looks it up in this dictionary, it finds the price of the crust, it makes this a float, a decimal number, and then it adds that to our bill. So hopefully that makes sense of what it does. Okay, so now let's continue. We're getting in the topping, we're adding our toppings. So we just added the topping price to the bill. And now we want to say, let's just take in some input that says your total bill total is, and then the dollar sign, and let's make this a F string. And then let's type in the bill, right? Okay, so would you like to confirm your order? Remember, this doesn't really do anything. And then enter yes/no. Okay. And then last, we're just printing out thank you for shopping with us. Have a great day. That doesn't do anything either. Like that, okay? So let's run this and see if it works. So first it's gonna ask us what's our name. Oh, okay, thank you for catching that. Okay, let's run it again. Asking what's our name, just say X. Hello, what kind of pizza crust would you like? Let's say thin. How many toppings would you like to add? Let's say 3, right? And look here, it says enter topping 0, right? In the output here, it says to enter topping 1. We want to start from topping 1, right? Does anyone have any ideas of how we could fix this? Type it in the chat. Okay. Okay, yeah, so we could fix this by, remember we're just doing a for loop using the range key. So remember what the range does is it starts with the first number. And if you have one number, then it defaults to starting from 0. But if we have 2 numbers, then it will start from the first number. So if we want it to start from 1, it will start, we just type in 1 as the first number. And remember, the range function, it will go from 1 to the second number, but not counting the second number. So we want to add 1 to this, like that. Okay, so let's try running it again. What is your name? Let's just follow the example here. So Jeff, what kind of pizza would you like? Thin. How many toppings? 2. Enter topping 1, olives. Enter topping 2, mushrooms. And then your total bill is $12. Would you like to confirm your order? Let's say yes. And then it says, thank you for shopping with us. Have a great day. Okay, so that's how you would answer this question. Of course, to make it better, you could add comments. You could try to make it a little bit more easier to read. So this has a lot of lines, but does everyone understand how this works? Okay, type in no if you do not understand. Okay, so nobody typed in no, so we're just going to continue. So today we're going to go over objects. So what is an object? An object is a data structure in Python. So strings are objects, and objects also have methods that you can perform. So an example of a method that you can perform with a string is the capitalize method. So this just capitalizes the string. And then objects also have classes, which we will talk about. So let's get into it. So objects also have attributes as well. So if we created a class like this, we created this variable called x and assigned the value 245 to x, like that. And then we can access this value that we just created, x, by doing the class name dot and then the value of this class. So this is the attribute of this class here. So the attribute X of this class is 245. And then if we wanted to, we could also change it without doing anything here. So here we created this, we said the class name and then .x, and then we changed the value. So it's 246 now. And to access the attribute, you can use the function has@attr, type in the class name and then the attribute to check, and this will just return true or false if this class has the attribute. So if I did this class name and then the attribute X as a string, then this would return true because X is a value of this class. But if I did something like, I don't know, if I did something else, then this wouldn't work. This would return false. It would compile, it just would return false. And then set attribute is the same thing as this, what this line does. Both of these lines do the same thing. It's just that in this case, you type in the name of the class, and then you type in the attribute that you want to add, the set. Okay, so let's continue. So instances. Can anyone guess from what we've learned so far what an instance is? Type it in the chat. Type in what, try to guess what an instance is. It's okay if it's not correct. Okay, so we had some guesses. So an instance is when you create an object. It was written right here this whole time. So if I created this list object here, I'm creating an instance of the class list. So A is an instance of the class list. So I'm taking the class, which is called list, and I'm creating an instance of it. So in a sense, I'm just, you can think of it as spawning a list. And then B is like I'm creating a new list. And then Python also has a function called is. So if A is B, since both of these are different instances, they will be false because we instantiate. This is a separate, we created a new object here and a new object here. But A is not B because A is this list over here and B is this list over here. Even though both of the lists are the same, they were both created separately. So even though they have the same contents, they were both made separately. So to give you an example, let's go, or no, let's come back to that later actually. We'll go to the example later, don't worry. But imagine that you create a class, right? So we just went over how to create a class here. Class, and then the class name. You can, let's say that you created a class already, and then A is a class, is the class name, and then you're just creating that class by putting 2 parentheses after it. And then B is the same class, but you created a new object. And then you did A is B, this would return false, because in A you created the class over here, and then, or the object over here, and then B you created the object over here. So even though they're both the same object, they were both instantiated separately. So if you did A is B, then it would return false. But if you did something like is A equal to B, then maybe that might return true. But if you said if A is B, then this would most likely return false. Okay. So there's also an is instance. There's also an is instance function. So let's say that you created a list, this list, and you assigned it to the variable A. And then if you ran this function here, which is instance and then A comma list, it will see if A is a list. I think we might have discussed this before. I'm not sure, but I don't remember exactly, but this is what this function does. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So when we're creating, this is methods. You'll find this very useful. So the first method we're going to go over is the init method, which it basically just, this method runs when you first instantiate an object. So let's break it up first. So we have these three letters D, E, F. Can anyone guess what these three letters might do? Okay, that's great. Correct. This means define. So in this case, we're defining this method here. We're defining the what this will do when it first runs. So in this case, we have some. So all of this will be in a class, by the way. So when we first run this method, or when we first instantiate the class, we have to type in a variable called width and a variable called height. And then when we type that in, it will immediately set the contents of this class, the attributes. It will give this class the width attribute and the height attribute. And then we can also create a method like this. In this case, we're calculating something. So this return statement should actually be lowercase. Just fix that real quick. Okay, so in this case, we type in the word self here to because this is part of the class. So in this case, we're returning self.width times self.height. So in case any of you are feeling that this is a little confusing, this will all make sense in a few minutes once we go over an example of it. Okay. So let's go over an example of it right now. Okay. So let's say that, so this is the program we just made. Let's comment it out. And then let's go to, so remember when I comment something, does anyone remember what happens when I comment something in Python? It is there. Yeah, it's still there, but this won't run. Okay, that's all it does. All it does is it's just there for me to see if I'm programming on this file. So it's not seen in the program at all. It doesn't do anything. The computer, when it runs this file, it will just skip everything that's commented. But if a programmer is there and they're trying to read your program, what your program does, then comments are used to explain what your program does. Or you can comment out some lines if you feel that they should be commented out. So in this case, we just commented out these lines just so this program is still up here for your reference if you need it later, but we're not using it right now in this file, so that way it doesn't run. Okay. So for our example, let's create two classes. Our first one is going to be called a rectangle. So we're creating a rectangle class, and then we're going to make our initialization. So to do that, we say def and then init, and then we have two underscores like that. And then we have parentheses, type in the word self like that. So this is, in a sense, the minimum that we need for our initialization. But we can add other things too. So does anyone have any ideas of what we could add to this here? We could add anything. Yeah, we could add a height. We could add width. We could add a length if this is a rectangular prism. You know what, let's just make it that. Rectangular prism. Okay. Okay, like that. So we could add all of these. If you want, we could add a color. Right? You can get as creative as you want with this. And then after this, you just we follow our colon format, and then we just assign all of these to the value, to attributes of this rectangular prism. So this rectangular prism, it has a height, it has a width, it has a length, and it has a color. Okay, so self.height. So self is referring to the rectangular prism. So whenever I say self, you can think of it as if I replace this with the word rectangular prism here. The self is just referring to our class. So I say self.height is equal to height. And then let's do that for everything else too. We have 4 things, 4 attributes. And then we have color. So notice that we didn't even define if this is a string or if this is an int or if this is a float or anything like that. All we really have to do is just give these variable names, and that's all we have to do, right? For our purposes right now. So for now, just don't worry about int or floats or anything, right? Dealing with these attributes right now. Okay, so let's create another function called, I don't know, does anyone have any ideas for what function we should create? Yeah, we could say cube, but this is a rectangular prism. Maybe by cube you're referring to something else, like maybe the volume. But how about yeah, let's create a function called a method called volume. So in our volume method, we already have all the attributes of our rectangular prism. So our rectangular prism has a height, a width, and a length. It also has a color, but we're not going to use that because we don't need to use the color when we're calculating the volume. So in case if you don't remember, the volume of a prism is self.width times self.height times self.length. And this will give us the volume of our rectangular prism. And then, so does anyone remember seeing the return statement? We saw it in coding that at the end of last class, I think, but we never actually discussed what it does, right? So what the return statement does, first of all, can anyone guess, based on what this program, based on what we've seen so far, what this return statement might do? Okay, yeah, these are good guesses. So some people said gives the values, prints the volume. So this doesn't print anything. This does, giving the values is, I think, the closest answer that's correct. So when we say return, that means that when we run this method here, it will return this value. So to give you that idea, let's go back to our old Python interpreter, and then let's create a string. So so our string is going to be called, let's call it hello. So then if I said s dot lower, right, like this. So lower is a method of this class, right? So if I call this method on this class, then can anyone guess what would happen? Yeah, it would give me this string, but in lowercase letters, right? So essentially it is returning the string, but in lowercase letters. So this is the value that is being returned by this method. This method will return the value hello, in lowercase, that is. So when we say return, this is just replacing the method that is being done with the value of what we're returning. So that way, in case you're wondering, if you look at it, the value of s is still uppercase hello, right? If I do s dot lower, that doesn't change the value of s. It returns this, but the value of s is still the same. That's because we didn't assign this to anything, right? So if I said x is equal to s dot lower, now we're assigning the value of lowercase hello to the variable x. So now we can actually keep this value here, while s is still the same. In case we want to maybe we're making a program and we want to see how the maybe we wanted to see maybe we wanted the user to type in some kind of string and the program would make the string lowercase, then this would be useful, right? Because it's returning the value of the string but in lowercase letters. Okay, so now let's create another class and let's call it the circle class. So circle, like this. And then let's define some methods. So what value should we make? Let's make, let's say that, well, circles have a radius. Maybe we could add a color as well. But that's about it, right? Does anyone want to add anything else? Yeah, we could add a diameter and a chord. But the diameter, we can get that from the radius. And chord, I don't think some people in this class would know what a chord is. So let's just be as simple as we can. So in case you don't remember what a radius is, if we had a circle like this, right? And then let's say that the center of the circle is over here somewhere, right? The radius is just from the center to the side. So this is what the radius is. Okay, so this length of this line here is the radius. Okay. So that's just in case you didn't remember what the radius is, just recall that's what it is. So remember, we're going to do the same thing as before. So self dot radius is equal to radius. And then we want to do the same thing, but with color. Let's do the same thing with color. And so there we have it. Now let's make a new method to find the area of a circle. So we have the self, comma, and then, well, we don't need anything else because we have all of the attributes right here. So now we could say, let's separate this by a space to make it easier to read, and this too. Okay, so def area, we want to return the area of this circle. So for this, we could say math.pi. This is how we get the variable pi. In case you don't know how to find the area of a circle, that's fine. This is just an attribute of math. So remember when we talked about attributes, right? If I said something.x, and it will give me the value of x, right? Like this. So class, and then the class name, and then the attribute of this class. So this is pretty much the same thing. Think of it like that. So when I do math.pi, if I do everything correctly, it will give me the value of pi in Python. Okay, so we want to return, so the area of a circle is pi times radius squared, or pi r squared. So we want to multiply this by the radius squared, which is self.radius, and then we want to square this value. So we can just do that like this. Okay, so does everyone understand what this does? Or does everyone understand how this works? We'll go over what it does in a second. So does everyone understand what we just did by writing all of these lines? Okay, so does anyone not understand it? Okay, so nobody said they don't understand it. So let's start talking about some of the things we can do with this. So let's say that R is equal to, and then we want to make a rectangular prism, right? So let's say R is equal to rectangular prism, and then we give parentheses after. And remember, we have to, because this is the name of the class that we made here. So a good way to comment this is, let's comment this and say, here we create the rectangular prism class. And then you could say something, say the same thing here. So here we create the circle class, right? So in this, can anyone guess what we would put in here? Well, in our rectangular prism, we need a height, a width, a length, and a color. So we have to give a height. So let's say that the height of our rectangular prism is, let's just ask the user that. Input height. Okay, so we're going to ask the user, what height do you want in this rectangle? Let's, to make this easier to read, let's create a new variable. So h. Okay. And then let's make a variable for all of these. So we have a height, we have width, which will be w. We have length, say L, and we have color, and we'll call that C, like this. Okay. So, and then we want to answer all of these variables in this order. So first is height, like this, and then next is width. So we type that variable in. Next is length, so L, and then last the color. So we type all of these variables in this order to match the format of this. Okay, and if I run this, it'll ask me for the height, which is, let's say 3, the width, let's say that's 4, and the length is 5, and maybe the color is, oh wait, we accidentally took color and int. Yeah, that was a good catch. Let's redo this. So let's say height is 1, width is 2, length is 3, and color is, I don't know, blue. Okay, so in this, notice nothing happened in our output, but we did create a rectangular prism with this height, with the height 1, the width, that is 2, the length, and we said that was 33, and the color blue. So notice what would happen if I typed in print and then rectangular prism. So first of all, can anyone guess what might happen if I did this? Okay, so nobody guessed, so let's just run it and you'll see. Let's hit red. Okay, so we got class main.rectangular prism. Well, that is because this rectangular prism is indeed the name of a class, right? So we essentially just printed out the class here. Okay, so can anyone guess what would happen if I said R? If I typed in R here? Okay, so I'll just do it again and you'll see. So now notice we had almost the same thing as we had last time. So before we had this, now we have underscore main dot rectangular prism object at this location. So that is because we created a rectangular prism object. And this is the memory location on my computer that it stored this object on. So when I'm running this program and I'm storing these variables, it's storing this object at this location in my memory. Okay, so that's what that does. And then remember, if I wanted to do something like, maybe if I wanted the height, I could do r.height. like that. And it would give me the height of this rectangular prism that we made. So 2, 3, 4, and then red. So it's the height is 2. We just printed out the height. What if we tried return function? So I'm not sure what you mean by return function. Oh, do you mean if we just typed in the word return? Instead of print. So if we typed in return here, is that what you mean? Okay, so you know what? I'm just going to run this and show you. So we did get a syntax error because return, it's outside of our function. It has to be in a function like this. So def, we're defining our method, our function, and that's pretty much the main place where you use the word return. So that's where it is. So now let's print out the volume. So now that we're running out of time, let's try to go a little faster. So let's print out our volume. Does anyone know? Can anyone guess what would happen if I did r.volume? Okay, so if I did r.volume, this was actually a trick question, right? It won't do nothing because we have defined the name volume here, but we'll actually get the, it will tell me what volume is. So r.volume is a function in this class. So here's the function or the method, and it's a method of this object that's at this location in memory. Okay, so to actually run that function, we need to add 2 parentheses after the word volume like this. And now when I run it, it will give me the volume of my rectangular prism, which is this. Okay, and the same thing works for the circle class as well. So in case you are still thinking about this, you might want to screenshot this. It will probably be helpful for you later on, so you can look at it, or you could just look at it in the recording as well. So the same thing works for circle as well. So in circles we have, let's say we have a circle called CIR, and that equals, and let's say that the radius is, say the radius is 2 and the color is, I don't know, red. And then we wanted to print out the volume of, or the area of this circle. So CIR dot area, and then parentheses like this. And now if I typed in the height, or no, the height is for this rectangular prism, comment that out, because now we just want to see the circle. Oh, right. So when I typed in math.py, you actually, what Python does is it looks in my program and it doesn't see the word math here. So what we want to do is we want to import math. So usually when we did rectangular prism, and then we said r.height, it saw that that there's a class called rectangular prism here. So it was easily able to find, okay, all we have to do is just find the height of this rectangular prism. So in this case, we don't have the math class here. So we want to import math like this. So now if I ran it, it would give me the area of this circle to the precision that Python allows. Okay, should math be imported before line 22? So remember, line 22 is over here when we are in the rectangular prism. We're using the math function over here in line 32. So in the class circle. And what Python does is first, let's take this in Python in the steps that the computer would go in. So first our computer, let's say we didn't have this. First our computer would go to 41. It would skip all of these, or wouldn't skip all of them. We'll go over like the order it goes in later, but first it will go to this line here, run this line. and it will say, okay, CIR is a variable of circle. So we're going to go to circle. The class circle is here. And we're going to set this radius and color to 2 and the color red. And then we're going to print out the area. So then after it creates the circle, we go to the next line and we say, okay, we want to print out this circle and we want to use this function on this circle object. So we go to the circle class because this is a circle object, and then we run this function here. And that's when it sees math.py. So it actually runs this first. So that's why we want to run import math over here. You're right, we couldn't import math here too, but just for readability's sake, we did it over here. Okay, so we're running out of time, so let's go over the last slide, which was multiple objects. So we'll go over this more later when we go into the second part of object-oriented programming, where you can create multiple objects very easily. So in this case, if we wanted to create a list of rectangles, we could do so really easily like this. So we're creating a rectangle object for I in range 10. So what this does is it makes a rectangle object. It makes 10 rectangle objects cycling through this loop, and it puts them in this list here. Okay, and you can also find the area for all of the rectangles like this. So for I in rectangles, because this is the list, and you're just changing each of the values to the area of each of the rectangles, assuming that you created a rectangle object. The plan was to make a rectangle object for this as well, but we just decided to do rectangular prism, just for fun. Okay. So in case you missed the screenshot, keep in mind there will also be a recording as well posted. But if you want, you can just take a screenshot right now too. Okay. So we have 2 minutes left. So let's. This is a really easy program. In this problem, we want to return a value that will solve this problem. So this should only take like a few seconds. We have 2 monkeys, A and B, and the parameters A smile and B smile. So parameters meaning the values that are in this method. So A smile is a value and B smile is a value, and they're called parameters because that's just if they're in the method header, then that's what we call them. And then if A smile and B smile are both smiling, then that means we're in trouble. So A smile and B smile indicate if each of the monkeys are smiling, and then we are in trouble if they are both smiling, or if neither of them is smiling. And then return true if we are in trouble, right? So this should be really simple, right? Because all we want to do is just return is A smile and B smile the same. Yeah. So if A smile, we could do if A smile is equal to B smile, like that. Oh, okay, you said if A smile and B smile is equal to true. Yeah, we could do that. A smile, but you can't type it in that way. You'd have to type it in if A smile is equal to true, like this, and B smile is equal to true, like that. If they're both equal to true, then we return true, right? If they're both smiling, we return true. If they're both true, we return true. And then if they're both false, we also want to return true. So if they're both smiling, and then if they're both false, so if A smile is equal to false, and if B smile is equal to false, then we want to return. Yes, that is a good point. We should use an elif, or we could use an elif, but it's okay. Because once you put the return statement, the whole method will end. once you return something, the method will end. You cannot return twice. So in this case, it would still work if I did, even if I didn't do an elif here. So the question was if I typed in elif here, it would work even if I didn't, because we're using return statements. So I could say elif like that. It wouldn't really change anything. But yeah, that's a good catch, good practice to have. Just keep in mind that it's not necessary in this case. So else we want to return false, right? Because if they're not the same, then we're just returning false. Okay, so just this was actually kind of a cheesy question, because you can actually do all of this in just one line by saying return a smile is equal to b smile, right? And if you think about it, if a smile is equal to b smile, that would return true if they're both true, and that would also return true if they're both false, and it would return false if they're both different. So this is actually kind of a cheesy question. Yeah, you can do all of this in a very short one line. So this is how you should think of problems. There's this website called CodingBat, which gives you free problems like this to think about, which are really useful in Python when you're practicing Python, and also just useful in general if you want to exercise your brain. So that's something to keep in mind. Remember, our next quiz will be posted soon, most likely this Monday, so be on the lookout for that. Remember to take our quizzes. Some of you joined late, so you might have missed our new the new rankings here. So basically, if you get a certain number of points on accumulated quizzes, so like say Imran Khan got 1510 points over all of the quizzes that this person has done so far, then they will, as long as they pass the passing point to get into this level, they will make it into this level. So, and we also had some people that did make it into levels 3 and 4. And once you make it into level 5, you're eligible for your certificate. So remember to do your quizzes. In a lot of cases, you're probably doing much better than you think. And just to give you an idea, that's why we put each person's points, accumulated points, next to their name. Okay, so that's the end of our class. It's now 12:05. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you next week.